Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our podcast where we talk everything and anything SEO as search everywhere and optimize everywhere. And today is that episode when we talk to Natalia. Of course, you know her. She's on every conference, in every podcast. She's in my podcast second or third time, so I'm super happy. And we're going to be talking about how different search engines work. She is one of the few experts in this world that understand that because she works as well with Baidu as much as DuckDuckGo or Google, and she can explain you all the differences. But we're going to be talking quite a lot about Baidu because that is a territory we have not uncovered yet. So, Natalia, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Ivana. I'm so excited to be back.
Me too. I'm super happy you're with us. So, I'll start right away. What's Baidu? How does it work? How does it look? I never been to China, so I never even opened it. So tell me all about it, like to someone who never seen optimized or worked with Baidu or even clicked on a link in Baidu. Do they have AI overviews? Is it just links? How is it?
So yeah, Baidu is the China's dominant search engine. It has been for a while, since forever. Because in China, the internet is not as we know it anywhere else. You could even maybe compare it more to intranet than internet. Because it's kind of things are inside the space of internet called separated by what's called Great Internet Wall, Great Chinese Internet Wall. And so essentially, Baidu is one of those big techs thriving in China just because there's no competition from the West. And as a search engine, that could be called Google on steroids. I like to call it like that because anything we see happening in Google in the last years, it has already happened or is also happening in Baidu right now. So we also have AI features. The SERPs are overloaded. The zero-click problem has been in Baidu also for a while, I think longer than in Google or more prominent than in Google. And essentially, the differences are really minor. Of course, the language is different because Baidu only operates officially in Chinese, but you see so many similarities. It's actually insane.
Okay, I think all of the search engines have got the basic function of searching. So if you go to DuckDuckGo, we already talked about it. It's very similar. It's a little bit different. Relies heavily on Bing. So how do you optimize for this? Like, is it still technical and on page? How do you optimize for on page? Do you speak Chinese? Like, I have so many questions. Just talk because I want to ask everything.
Okay, so Baidu setup initially, the biggest challenge is getting your website verified in their webmaster tools. They have a fantastic webmaster tools. They have a lot of tech information inside, but the barrier is to get verified because if you don't have a Chinese phone number and you're not operating in China and hosted in China, it's just difficult. And there are periods of time when simply just having a phone number is also not enough because the verification just doesn't go through. So typically the first challenge, big first step that can kind of slow you down is just getting that access. And then the whole process of optimizing starts. Lucky for me, I was working with a Chinese native speaker team who did all the on-page, so I wasn't involved in that bit because you really do have to be a native speaker to do that well. And I will never try to do SEO in languages I don't really speak and understand well. However, the technical SEO is a completely different story. Just because Baidu crawlers are way more simple, kind of dated, you could even say. So they don't process any JavaScript at all. So whatever we thought was a problem for Google until recently, now Google says it's better, but we still know there is some issue. You just cannot depend on JavaScript for Baidu at all. They're not going to process your content if they cannot see the rendered version. So the first big thing is really making a lean website. And lean website for China basically means not just the JavaScript part, because that can be done without big efforts. If you just build very lean HTML, that's fine. You also have to realize that because so many websites and providers are blocked in China, for example, Google, it's not advisable to use Google fonts or not to load the GA4 scripts because those scripts can break Baidu scrolling efforts just because they cannot access those resources. And you just want to take everything away from the code that potentially could slow you down or basically break the rendering of the page because something can be loaded like a font. So a very interesting strategy for China, and so many companies do this. And actually check this out because even Apple does that. So Apple famously is hosted on .com for every single market they're in. However, for China, they are hosted on .com.cn. That's the only market they are not hosted on the main domain. just because they realize that it's so much easier for Baidu to process your website if it's just Chinese language content. You don't need any other versions. So how for Google it might be beneficial to actually have a very complex multilingual site. For Baidu, you just want to have your Chinese version there. You don't need to bother your users in China with other versions. They're not interested in your Spanish, English, or German, right? Because there's no use for them. And same for the crawlers, because Baidu doesn't need your multilingual content. They're not a multilingual search engine. They are a Chinese search engine. So essentially, the best thing you can do for your Chinese visibility is take whatever website you have and host a separate version of it just in Chinese separately, just split it out. And that's going to give you a huge advantage because you will have only Chinese content that's only relevant to Baidu, and then the crawling and then indexing naturally will just become a way faster experience. So that's
interesting.
the nutshell of the first steps of technical SEO for Baidu.
No headache with href lengths, just Chinese.
No.
So are the pages or websites very ugly? I mean, there is no Java, no cool fonts. I mean, I don't even know if there is a Google font for like Chinese letters, but no cool fonts. Are they very, very ugly, very simple? Is it like you're visiting website from 1998?
Some websites in China have got a bit different UX that we're not used to in the West anymore. And definitely visually, it's also very different because if you just design for Chinese language, sentences are just shorter and the spread of the words is just so different. You wouldn't replicate a Western design thinking and put it there. But it's slowly changing. So a Chinese consumer is getting used to a nicer experience, but they're not that bothered by an ugly website. If the website is functional, if it just works, you can get away with it. And of course, if you have the resources to design something specifically for a Chinese market that also looks good, that's the future-proof strategy, yeah, because they're catching up basically with the same design or similar design styles that we like in the West.
That is fun because for Google, we always think like, are the users loving it and how long they staying on website? They're bouncing. We're trying to make it pretty and user friendly and very intuitive. So they don't have to bother about any of this. They don't even need to have like UX designers then.
I mean, to give you one example, there's one platform in China that's not literally a SEO platform, but it's considered to be another type of search engine for China, which is WeChat. WeChat is this huge ecosystem. It's this super app. It's anything from what WhatsApp would do, because it's a very similar kind of approach, to live streaming, to microblogging, to live feeds, to shopping, to payment systems. So it's like a super app. And this usually comes up because when people think of China, they think WeChat and they just assume it's like Google or something similar, but it's just very, very much wider and bigger and more comprehensive. But what's interesting with WeChat is that it's been around for, I think, 15 years now, and it's not changed its design at all. And since then, WhatsApp, that came up, I think, similar time, has redesigned itself so many times, have added so many features. And it's so interesting to see because so many of those features are copies of what WeChat has been doing for a while already. So we see this amazing chat solution that is just expanding to be more engaging with the audience. And now WhatsApp is trying to do the same. So I'm really loving those China parallels because when you get into that world, you almost see like where the Western texts sometimes take inspiration in. But it's very interesting that they've never redesigned. So with WeChat, it's a huge app. They've never changed the basics of the design. It's very simple. You could think it's dated, but this way they keep the user satisfied with what they know because by memory, just nothing changes. They don't have to relearn your platform. And it feels like, for example, with LinkedIn or with Google, for maybe older population, seniors who are not as tech savvy, it can be a challenge to come back to completely different design, right? So in a sense, it might feel ugly, but it's also more inclusive. And I think that there is this value of UX that's not pretty, the UX that's just stable and very simple and simplified to the core. So you know what you're doing every time instead of trying to figure it out every couple of months again and again.
Actually, I like that idea because I hate when something updates and like you were used to like new post here and now it's moved here and it takes me minutes to figure it out and it takes me minutes for several times when I visit the platform trying to figure out what's going on. So more stability is probably good. Yes, I see how that could work. But with what you're saying, the WeChat is much more advanced technologically than WhatsApp if WhatsApp is copying and didn't have to change anything for so many years. So they are more advanced in thinking, I think, maybe even in the simplicity of the design. I mean, tell me, how do they come up with all these clever things?
I mean, first of all, it's so interesting when you have such a different digital ecosystem so far away, and they are kind of separated from what we know in the West, so they can figure things out in a different direction. So they don't have the same approach. Sometimes they take different risks, and sometimes they pay off. Of course, there's different cultural context that will always have a difference that will change the way that things get developed. But I think the most interesting part is also the political one, because those big techs have been they really came to life thanks to the political climate and making it easier for those big techs to build and test and introduce payment system, for instance, which is something super political and even geopolitical. So I think there was a green light for them to advance as much as they have. There was a lot of growth economically that allowed them to test and go bigger and scale. And then there is this different reality they're dealing with, where they just go and test different ideas, and then something new comes out of it.
I think maybe the thing that they are so inclusive, as you said, or like it's you call it intranet. In West, we are so used to copying each other, right? Somebody comes up with a clever idea, we do the same one in blue, and then somebody else does the same in green. But it's basically the same thing. It's a copy. We are really copycats here. So maybe because they have just their little environment, they need to be more creative because there's nothing to copy.
Precisely. They're not restrained to certain trends that everyone's supposed to follow. They really go their own direction in so many ways. Yeah.
Do they have things like Instagram and TikTok and all of this? I mean, TikTok is theirs, right? I'm not huge on those platforms, so of course I'm asking stupid questions. But because it's so different, and Insta is like this mega thing in the West, is it anything in China?
So TikTok, which in China is called Douyin, is huge there. It's the same, let's say, UX platform, but it's a different algorithm and different feed completely. So you can, if you register in one, you don't show up in the other at all. It's two separate ecosystems. It started in China. It was proven to work, and then it scaled to the West. And very interestingly, in China, almost every big tech is way more than it's here. So in China, the TikTok China version, it's actually a huge e-commerce shop, massive, and it's entering to Europe now. I think with what they call TikTok Shop, which is I think they just launched it a couple of weeks ago, and they're just making trials now. It's been a very established sales channel for China for a long time. But what TikTok is also doing, and there are some very interesting movements. It's this rat hole. When you enter into that news niche and you read on it, then you keep coming with those new news items that nobody probably has heard of. So TikTok has very recently, I think last week, filed license in Brazil to become a bank. So they're looking into financial services in Brazil, which is one of those markets where it's huge. So clearly there is enough investment that could pay off. But at the same time, it's not a set market for banks, right? For banking, there's still way to break through and make something different. So I think they're testing some solutions we might see come to us at some point too, if they're successful there. So yeah, so Chinese tech is really trying, and also what the company that owns TikTok is doing in China. They also own now the most used personal LLM app on the market store in Chinese smartphones. So they have their own LLM. They used to be DeepSeek that everyone used, but now they've come up with something way more user friendly. So they also have more tools and more accessories to the normal user than just TikTok feed. And I also find it fascinating. I'm sure they're gonna try to make it international too, as long as it proves useful in China. Why not, right?
Fantastic. I mean, I'm looking forward. I'm not a TikTok person. I don't have that, but I always like to keep an eye open, like what's going on. Okay, so back to the optimization, because we strayed a little bit from that. So technical, super different. On page content that we don't understand. So, skip that.
I mean, on page is quite similar in the sense that you can replicate your normal strategies and make them work in China. So you still have metadata that's super interesting, and you just optimize it as well as you can based on the keyword data. What's interesting is that meta keywords is still in use for Baidu. It's very
Really?
little
We don't have it
importance.
since what, 2009? So
Exactly. So it's not that it's the breaker of the success or not. It's not a deal breaker, but because it's lost on its importance over the time, but it's still recognized by Baidu algorithm. So it's still nice to have. So if you have those list of keywords you're optimizing for anyway, you wouldn't want to miss out on filling them in. So it's funny because sometimes you have people using WordPress or some other tool saying, "Why do we even have meta keywords here? Who needs that?" And it's like, yeah, there are search engines that still use it. It's not completely forgotten because Google deprecated it.
fantastic. And these internal links work just like in our normal websites in Europe. Is that
Internal links,
important or
yes.
not really? Do they have sitemap as well?
Yeah, sitemap, you submit it to your webmasters and you want to have all those basics taken care of. Interestingly, robots works slightly differently than in Google because robots.txt is the file that also manages not just crawling but also indexing. So again, a Google thing with SEOs have argued about, can robots no index? Da, 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 da. In Baidu, yes, because they don't recognize meta robots no index. That's not something they care about at all in the code. So you cannot do it on the HTML level. You can do it on the robots.txt level. And it's very efficient. Like literally, when you just block something of robots, that's how it disappears from the index in Baidu. So it does work. It's been tested. Not many people know about it because it's this tiny difference that if you don't look close enough, you might never realize it's there. But actually, their documentation has never stated anything about robots with no index tags at all. So they're not saying it doesn't work. They just, for them, it's just not a topic because they've never used it.
Fantastic. Do they have anything else additional? Like we have sitemap, we have got robots now. The LLM file is becoming a thing. Do they have anything else that we don't have? And it's for them like, wow, we use this and it actually works. Just like the keywords still working. Is there any file that we don't use or know about and they actually use it?
Not that I know of. Nothing that seems out of ordinary. What they do have still, which I think us in the West, in Google, haven't seen for a while, is they still have manual penalties in place. But actually, recently on my LinkedIn, I've seen a couple of people sharing that they've just recently been blocked and they don't get a notice about it until they inquire about why the traffic has been wiped out to zero. They don't even know that that's a manual penalty. And then they get like a return message within the webmaster tool saying, you actually have violated our terms and conditions. So you still have to be wary. They are known to be a bit more black hat friendly. So there's still some black hat thing building going on that still proves to work until it doesn't. So the line there is more blurry, I think, than what we see. Just because, you can get banned overnight and you don't even know exactly when it happened.
Interesting. I mean, there are some manual penalties in our industry still because of all the violation of like parasite and all of that. Does the SERP there as well suffer of things like parasite SEO or canonical abuse or any of these that our industry heavily relies on? And I don't criticize it. It works. Google allows it. Fine. You learn how to work with it. It's still SEO strategy. But do they have this or are they stricter on it? Do you go to prison if you break the rules? I mean, how is it? Because it's not illegal in Europe. It's not. It's just Google does not like it. But as China is so different, they have got Baidu and China are basically one thing. First of all, does it exist? And second of all, is there a bigger punishment for it?
So I'm so glad you asked because there's interesting context to it. So when we think about parasite SEO, we often think about Medium or maybe getting visibility in Reddit, so then we get more visibility else. In China, Baidu showcases similar type of websites in their own results. So the Baidu group owns websites like equivalent of Quora, equivalent of Wikipedia, equivalent of Reddit. Honestly, anything you can think of that could serve as a parasite SEO platform for us, they own it there. And they feature it in their SERPs very prominently. So in a sense, it's not exactly pure parasite SEO. It's just getting into own Baidu ecosystem to be showcased. So it's almost like a branding exercise. So you make sure you own your branded topic on every of those platforms as much as you can, and you're part of the conversation. So I would even argue it's not considered black hat. It's even considered straight up healthy strategy for any brand to be doing.
For instance, SEO, isn't it? It's my search engine, it's my platform, therefore I'm gonna love it more. Just like Google loves Reddit. They just love it because they've got a deal.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, I call it preferential SEO. It's not even parasite. It's
Exactly.
yeah.
Professional
Okay. So
SEO. It's almost
cool.
like the whole strategy is rented land optimization. So you don't only think of your website. Actually, your website is one of the accessories, and you have to go onto those other platforms. That's the only way it goes. Just because obviously we know Google loves Reddit, but it has often promoted it and then in the next update dumped it down a bit. And then in Baidu, they never lose any of those visibility points. They're always prominent in the SERPs. So there, it's just a must-have to be part of it.
Fantastic. This is full of great tips if you are going to optimize for China. And link building, the last part of our, on page of page thing. Do they do links like we do? I mean, we go crazy for links. Like if you don't have links, you are no one. You don't have authority, you are no one. Google just simply doesn't love you. And the last spam update just proved it. Anyone with authority, either if you're a parasite SEO drop domain or you had lots of links, you really got more predominant real estate in the SERPs. If you didn't invest in links, bye-bye. So links are still it for our European SERPs or, Western SERPs. Is it in China or links are not that important? Are they important? How do they go about links? I mean, we all, buy links. We don't buy them. No, we buy links like crazy and it works. Google doesn't care. So how is it in China?
Links are very important. Baidu keeps saying that less and less than they used to, but still important. They've never lost importance. It's impossible for the algorithm to get away from that part because it's always been heavily dependent on links. But of course, that's true for any market. They have to be market relevant. So with your Chinese site already separating it from the rest of the domain and making it hosted in China, which is the strongest signal, you also want local links. Otherwise, US links, Europe links, they're not really powerful at all. And chances are, if the website that you are linked from is not even indexed by Baidu, they wouldn't even be visible. So you have to go local. But that's not a surprise for any SEO who's been doing international SEO already.
Okay, that's fantastic. Anything else that we've forgotten to mention? I mean, I think we sliced and diced Baidu left and right. We know the technical part, very surprising. The on-page, the soft metrics, the links, some social media. Is there anything else that we should know before we wrap this up that is like super important for you to tell us about Baidu or Chinese optimization?
So there are some interesting tools that I think would be a nice addition to this conversation. So whatever we've mentioned, it's always best to verify it. So first thing I want to say, and I think many people don't realize this, is that you from the West can access Baidu.com and use it as a search engine. And there's no difference for you to see. They don't mind people from the West using it. Actually, many Chinese who move abroad still use their own services that they grew up with. The only reason they have to block anything from the outside is that it doesn't meet the regulations, the publisher's laws, because they're very strict on what can be published, and whoever publishes anything takes the responsibility for it. Something we might see soon with AI overviews, with the recent rulings in Europe, and things that we are still debating. They've done from the get-go, so they have no issue hiding what the internet users can see in China. And that's Baidu, that's any news websites that you are welcome to read in Chinese and back translate to see what they're talking about on their daily news, what's important to them, or what's moved through the censorship, really, because that's often the case. So you can check Baidu results for your brand if you are supposed to be seen in China. If you have any presence in China, you can go in and literally check your brand name. You can see how the SERP looks like for yourself. You can see some AI overviews, style, results, and stuff like that. You can even try searching in English. English is not officially supported, but for very basic queries, you'll still get a result. So that's still doable. And then there are some better tools than that. And one tool I use, which has got a series of free tools, it's called Chinify. And there's like a visual speed test. So you can see how your website loads in China versus the West, and visually see screen by screen when it's loading. And I think it's so fascinating just because that's the only way to actually understand what's the user experience on the other side of the internet there. Like you cannot imagine how your website is loading until you see it, and you might see that there is an error here or an issue there. So there are still better tools there. And one tool I can recommend because I use it, and it's got a couple of free tools you can use yourself on their website. It's Chinify. And Chinify has got a visual speed test that compares how a website loads, specifically in China, in different locations, compared to the Western locations in US or in Europe. And you can see screen by screen how does loading look like and how does it compare. And straight away you can see difference in the fonts, how they load, or maybe some elements being broken and how much that lags. So website hosted in the West with no optimization for China will typically take over a minute to load, if it loads. And I think that's very visual, impactful tool, even to escalate that kind of issue within an organization. Because when you see how poor the experience is, it's so much easier to actually put some budget into it and make it work. So yeah, I do recommend testing these kind of things. Chinafy has got a couple of other basic tools for free, though. If anyone is interested in Chinese internet and Chinese marketing, that's definitely a good place to start.
I knew nothing. Okay. Usually when I go to podcast, I know what we're going to be talking about and I know something or a lot of things about the topic. Here, I knew nothing. So everything was like eye-opening. Thank you so much for sharing. This was brilliant. Thank you for joining us and thank you for sharing your knowledge, Natalia.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. And everyone, if you ever want to go to China, now is the great time because so many countries can go visa-free up to 30 days. And if you do, remember, have a VPN pre-installed and a good one. When I mean good one, I'm not going to use names, but the main VPNs like ExpressVPN, they don't work in China just because China has caught up and knows this is a common provider. So look for a more niche indie project for a VPN, and then you are set to still connect to your favorite websites when you're there.
Or buy a proxy.
Or buy a proxy.
Thank you.
If you got value from this video and want direct access to us, weekly calls, training, and the latest SEO updates, and a community of people operating at this level, click the link in the description to join the boardroom. We'll see you inside.